Okay, hi guys. Welcome to Pooling Around, our show. I'm Sean King. This is Chris Wilman. And today we've got Kent Taylor. For those of you who don't know who Kent Taylor is, he's a legend here in the Oklahoma City area. I've personally known him for over 20 years. He made my first custom pool cue, along with many of my friends' first ever custom cue. And he's not only been a great player in his life, he's been a great salesperson, a great cue maker, and we're here at what's called the Billiard Cafe. And yesterday is when he had an auction selling off tables, equipment, everything that a pool room has. So we're here today with Kent. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
What's up?
I want to say before you go any further, make sure you like, subscribe, and share to help this channel grow.
Okay, I'd like to start, Kent, from when you started playing pool.
I believe I was 14. First I played was snooker. Everybody played snooker. Nobody played pool. Very few people played pool. And if they played, it was usually 8-ball. The pool room we played in was a beer joint. Domino tables, old-fashioned wood floors, copper spittoons. And we had 4 snooker tables, 2 3-cushion carom tables, and we had 2 4x8 pocket billiard tables.
Okay.
And but everybody played snooker. Which is the first game I learned how to play with.
Well, how did you end up in there at 14?
Well, I was in a small town, and that was the only thing we could do, was play pool.
Okay.
Didn't have any skating rinks or bowling alleys, etc. There was nothing for kids to do, except in the summertime. But during school year, it was, it just wasn't a lot to do. And the owners let us come in and played snooker for about 4 years till I was 18, joined the Navy.
At 18, you joined the Navy.
As soon as I could.
What year was this?
1958.
Okay.
And was in the submarine service for 4 years. Got out in 1962. Started selling something because I couldn't get a job. I was a sonar in the Navy, and there was no opportunity for a sonarman in Wichita, Kansas.
Sonar man.
Yeah, so there was, except in the oil field, but couldn't get a job.
And you're in Wichita, Kansas.
I was in Wichita, Kansas, where my folks lived. And the first thing I started selling was, I worked for the University of Chicago, selling Encyclopedia Britannica, which is online now. They don't sell them anymore.
Right.
And
Door to door?
door to door, $80 a sale. I was selling 5, 6, 7 units a week. I met a girl. She wanted me to get a real job, quote, real job.
Uh-huh.
And so I went out to Cessna and applied for a job. And the guy that interviewed me didn't make as much money as I was making. I was driving a brand new Cadillac because I was doing pretty well, doing pretty good selling books.
Yeah.
And but I've been in sales almost all my life. We moved to Denver in 1969.
So you're 29 then?
69? No, I was born 1940. Yeah, I've been 29. You're right. Started playing pool again, and played a lot of good players in Denver. Played Fats. He was through Denver doing an exhibition. We played 9-ball. We had a world of players who used to come through there. Then you could, go up and down the road playing pool. Excuse me. Let me shut this off. Because the whole motels were like, well, Motel 6 was $6 a night. Today they're
That's how the name came from? It used to cost $6, huh?
$6 a night.
Okay.
And Motel 6. Today, that same motel room sells for about $69 a night. So it's, you know, what the economy's done the last few years.
So in Wichita, at that time, who was the best player in Wichita?
Greg Stevens.
Greg Stevens.
Yeah, he was the best player. He was a shot maker, and there a lot of people came to Wichita to play Greg because he was a real, you know, he gambled. He was a gambler, and he gambled high, and he didn't turn anybody down. He played everybody.
Yeah.
I remember he played Squirrel and beat Squirrel, and Greg didn't know how to play one puck. Marshall Carpenter. And next day, Squirrel got a ball, 8-7, and got even. But he was lucky. But
Squirrel.
Greg, yeah, that's what they used to call it, Squirrel. That was his nickname, Marshall Carpenter. At that time, was the best player in the United States in one pocket. He didn't play. He couldn't beat Greg, and he couldn't beat Ronnie Allen and that caliber. But he was known as one of the best players in the country at that time. But Greg was a shot maker, but I mean, he didn't care what the cue ball was; he'd make the ball. Let's see, who else was there? That was about it. Greg was the best player in Wichita at that time.
But then you left to Denver.
Went to Denver in '69 and started playing pool again at a place called the Family Fun Center, primarily, and played Fats. He came through on an exhibition, and we played 9-ball. I remember it was 1970, and because they got married in '71, that was a mistake. Anyway, and my ex-wife was there when we played, and she was rooting for Fats.
Oh no, really?
And well, he was famous at that time. And he was a great player. He was a good player. He didn't play 9-ball real good, but he played one pocket, banks, and billiards, 3-cushion billiards. Excellent player.
And what did you guys end up playing?
We played 9-ball,
Yeah.
which he didn't play very well. That's why we played 9-ball.
Got it?
And let's see, I got married, quit playing pool for a while because it's really hard to play pool if you're married. Because if you're up all night gambling, it does hurt the marriage after a while.
Yeah.
So we got divorced, and
You kept playing.
Oh, I kept playing.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Started making cues in the 80s.
80s, so you're in your 40s.
In my 40s, I was 46. It was 1986. Started repairing cues, and I started making them. And actually, it wasn't in Denver. It was in Dallas. I started repairing cues. And used to play at a pool room called Rusty's.
All right, now before we go into the cues, I got to ask a couple questions about this playing. And you told me a couple stories about Luther Lassiter, Don Watson, a little bit about Ronnie Allen. I want to hear, and you also talked about playing Earl Strickland.
Well, I played Earl by mistake. I didn't know who he was. And that was here in Oklahoma City when that happened. That was it was either 1981 or 1983. I think it was 1981. Earl just turned 21. And
At the pool room?
at a bar
Okay.
down in South Oklahoma City. And we were playing on the bar table. And I lost the first night. And I said, I'll play tomorrow, but I'll play on the gold pen.
A 9-foot table.
A 9-foot table. And he says, great. So that should have been my first clue, but I didn't take it that way. Anyway, we started out, I got even, got my money back, except for $100. And he couldn't play on the tables, giving him a hard time. Had brand new Malley or Stevens claw.
So you got him on the 9-foot.
I got him on the 9-foot in the beginning when we switched tables. Oh, I thought he was a sucker.
That's right.
It's unbelievable. And he won the break on the. We switched tables to a table that had cloth that was broken in up at front over Chester's pool. It was called the pool room then. And he broke and ran a rack. I quit, a hunter loser, and that was it. And I found out later that he played Mike Siegel down at Cassidy's, right off Interstate 10 in Houston. They were playing for $50,000 sets, and he beat Mike, or broke even. So
Wow.
I really had no business playing.
Yeah, you got out of there, you lucky.
I got real lucky.
Well-
The fellow was with me kept saying, this guy could play. And I said, well, I don't know, we'll see. Well, he could.
What year did you meet Don Watson?
It was in 64, 65. There was a tournament in Long Beach at the Commodore. I believe it was the Commodore Hotel in Long Beach. And let's see. Yeah, it was the Commodore. I believe it was.
Was he a great player when you met him?
Well, evidently it was. What had happened, me and another pool player were splitting rent. We lived in El Monte, right there in L.A. And we were down at the tournament. We were watching the tournament, and we were standing out front talking, a bunch of us pool players, and a backer came up. Jimmy Moore's backer. They called him Fez. And he controlled all the gaming in Albuquerque and all over New Mexico at the American Legions and the VFWs, etc. And he handed me a big wad of money and said, I want you to take, I'd never met the guy in my life.
Fez hands you a lot of money.
A wad of money. And he said, I want you to take this guy here, his name's Don Watson, around to these certain pool rooms. And I said, well, how do I know which one to play? He said, don't worry about it. Don's probably the best 9-ball player in the country. And Laster was there, and he agreed.
Luther Laster's there.
He said he is. He really is. And so, we went from there. Don stayed with us for about 2 years. He beat everybody he played in California. He really did. You know Joe Salazar?
Still sells cues, yeah.
Yeah, Joe played him when Joe was beating everybody. And he told me just a few years ago, he says, Don was the best player he ever played.
Yeah?
Yeah, he was a good player. He was the United States snooker champion, and he won a world one-pocket championship at Stardust, I guess, where it was. Great player. Didn't look like he could play at all. Stood straight up in the air and didn't look down the cue. Just looked at the object ball and pulled the trigger. And,
Yeah.
and he shot real easy. The ball just would get to the pocket and fall. Nothing. Because he was a snooker player.
Okay.
And that's the style they played. But to look at him, you'd think you could give him the 7-ball, and it was the other way around, really.
Yeah? Well, what about him being a character? I mean, we know he was a drinker.
Don was, he liked to drink. He wasn't really a character. He's a pretty quiet guy.
Yeah?
And a good guy. He really was.
Yeah.
But he could really play pool. I mean, he just beat everybody in California at that time. And we had some good players out there. Ronnie was out there. Who else? Jack Cooney. On and on and on. Some great players were out there. And none of them beat Don.
Even Luther Laster.
Well, Luther said he agreed that he was one of the best 9-ball players in the country. And Luther told me about Moscone. He said, Moscone used to come down in Norfolk or Elizabeth City and practice before a tournament. And he said he'd get the best of Mosconi in the beginning. He said as soon as he got the stroke, he needed the 7-ball.
From Moscow.
From Mosconi. And I've always heard that Mosconi didn't play 9-ball. But he played 9-ball at Lassiter, so evidently he did. But
What about when Don, you told me Don gave Miserac the 8 one day?
well, yeah, he did by mistake. We didn't know who he was. There was a bowling alley called Tropicana Bowl in Inglewood. And everybody went out there after the bars closed. And when the bars closed, we'd all the pool players would end up at the Tropicana, and they'd match up and play and gamble. Don and I walked out there, or drove out there, walked in, and there was only one player in there, and he had a pool cue. Don says, well, I wonder if he'll play. So I said, well, we'll find out. So Don went over and he come back and he said, yeah, he'll play a $500 set, but he wants the 8. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, can you give him the 8? He said, I think I can. So Don grabbed a house cue, and they played. And Don beat him a set for $500. And had no idea who he was.
You gave him the 8 with a house cue?
With a house cue.
Steve Meserac.
And
he didn't know that it was him.
Didn't know it for years.
Yeah.
He showed up on television with a beer ad.
And you guys got the 500.
Yeah, we did. We did. Don was a great player. He really was. Had some bad habits with alcohol, but other than that, he was a super guy. Well, I can tell you some stories.
Well, that's why we're here.
There was, you've heard of Compton, California.
Yes.
L.A. area. Bad area. And there's an area in Compton down where the railroads are. It's called the Laboda. And the Laboda in English would mean the bottoms.
The bottoms?
The bottoms. It was in a floodplain.
Okay.
Near the L.A. River, which is always usually dry. And there was a bar down there called Mary's Dollhouse. And I'm sure all these people are deceased now. But we took Dawn down there, and she was living with a guy named Mario. And his nickname was Green-Eyed Mario. And he was a really good player, bar player. And Mary had a kitchen and a bar, 2 pool tables, and it drew a crowd. And they played for a couple days, taking a break, of course, to sleep and eat, etc. But on the second day, Don had everybody broke. We had all the money. And so then we had to give him the 8 for a sizable amount of money we had already won. And the Don had to give him the 8-ball. And we tripled up the bet. And I think we were playing 7 ahead for several thousand. And Don was walking, and Mary went back in the I probably shouldn't use names, but they're all probably deceased now. She went back in the kitchen and got a butcher knife. And Don's running out. Case game for the money.
Case game.
For the money.
He's running out.
And she come out with that butcher knife and swung at him. And Don ducked, walked around the table and shot another ball at him. And this went on for 3 or 4 shots. He got out, but they wouldn't pay us. It was a multicultural crowd, and a couple of the guys were, Cannonball was there from Chicago, and one of his friends, he was in the minority, and then the rest of them were Hispanic. But he said, we can't help you. We're in the wrong place to be helping you. And we couldn't get out with the money. So I was with a guy named Popcorn. And most of the pool players in L.A. heard of Popcorn. He was my roommate. And he went to the payphone under the pretext of using the restroom and called a motorcycle club. And about 20 minutes later, we heard this roar coming up to the bar, and it was the Hells Angels. And they came in, and we got out with the money.
Yeah.
I,
Wow, that's
it
right out of a
was
movie.
Unbelievable. But
That should be in a movie.
it should have been. Yeah, it was quite a story. But
Called
it
from a
was an
payphone.
amazing roar, just all those motorcycles coming in.
Popcorn.
Popcorn, he got the name. He hit somebody, knocked him out, and poured popcorn all over him in San Francisco. They named him Popcorn from there on. He and I were roommates in El Monte. And what he would do, his best move was to set up pool games. And Don played everybody. And I had a new Cadillac, still had it, well, it was about a year or two old then. And we drove everywhere. We went to Tijuana, Ensenada, Rosarito Beach, down through Chihuahua. We went to Mexico. We played everywhere. And it was just unbelievable. This guy could really play. He had full control of the cue ball. It was just unbelievable. And I'm telling you, you wouldn't believe it. He'd shoot so slow, and he'd roll balls. And the balls would just barely get to the pocket, and they'd fall. And you couldn't tell he was a pool player. That's just the way he played. It's amazing.
Well, you roll the ball pretty good yourself.
Roll it, I guess.
Yeah, I remember in my first lessons from you were all about just rolling ball.
Well, it's how I started out playing on a snooker table. That's probably why. But you can do things with a ball by rolling it that you can't do by, with a powerful stroke. But
Can you tell us anything about Ronnie Allen?
Ronnie, yeah, I can. Ron, every time I saw Ron, he'd show me a new one-pocket shot. Every time. He'd come running over, and we were pretty good friends. In the late 70s, I had got my divorce, was playing a lot of pool, and a friend of mine knew Ronnie, and he was from Denver, and he invited Ronnie out. There was a lot of action out there in Denver on bar tables. So Ronnie stalled in this one bar where all the betting was happening, and we had a big game lined up. Nobody knew Ronnie until the night of the game, and somebody walked in and says, "Hey, that's Ronnie Allen," and we locked it up, got out of the place. But Ronnie was
What made him so good?
he just had a great imagination, really. That's what made him good. We had a player here in town that beat him. His name was, he won one of the tournaments out at Stardust. And I can't even think of his name. He just passed away about 10 years ago. And he was in his 80s. Hitchcock. Norman Hitchcock.
Norman Hitchcock.
Yeah, great player. A lot of guys in Denver, when I was in Denver, they talked about this guy coming through on a Greyhound with a one-piece cue, beat everybody in town in Denver.
That was Norman?
That was Norman.
I met you the same time I met him at Art Station.
Yeah, he could play. And he stood straight up in the air. I guess that was the style then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jimmy Moore stood straight up. Now everybody's down real low with a chin on the cue. But Fat stood straight up.
What about you?
It was about halfway.
Halfway?
Yeah. Usually I like to get down a little bit. Now Moscone, a lot of pictures of him. He was standing up too, but actually on long shots, he got put down pretty far on the cue. And what a great player he was.
Who's the best female player you saw play?
Female?
Yeah.
Probably Allison Fisher, I guess. I played her in Orlando.
Yeah, she's
Great player. And
well, who taught you, I guess when you were 14, did someone help you?
sort of, we didn't have any pool players in that little town. The guys that I run around with knew how to hold the cue, and that's who taught me. And of course, it created a lot of bad habits at that time, and I had to really learn how to play. But
Did you ever read any books? I mean, there wasn't YouTube.
there wasn't any books, really. Didn't read any books. I learned a lot from Don. I used to take him around, and Popcorn would set up games, and I'd take Don to the games and we'd play and go back to El Monte with the money.
Well, did you get in a game while you were there, or just
Not
take
really,
him?
not really. Why would I play with Don Watson in
Right,
the dark?
I get it.
There wouldn't be no reason to.
So all the pool players that you've seen, where does James Walden rank amongst those players?
He's pretty high. James Walden is a good player. He's one of the best, really.
What made him so good, James?
He was tenacious.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wouldn't give up. Filipinos didn't want to play him because he would never give up. There's a lot of psychologists like tennis. There's a lot. You got to break your opponent down to win if it's a close game. And James he just got a lot. He's tenacious. He's tenacious.
You think he's probably the best player that hardly anybody's ever heard of?
James? Well, no, there's a lot of good players. Every town's got their best player in the world. So,
I get what you mean.
Every town. In Wichita, it was Greg Stevens. In Denver, it was Danny Medina. In Oklahoma City, it was James Walden. James was really one of the best players I've ever seen play a rotation. He played good. James played Alex Pagulon in Tulsa, the Billiard Palace. And Pagulon broke and run 6 racks from the coin flip. Missed. No, he didn't make a ball in the break on the 7th rack. James got up and run 7th and ended up beating him. So, I mean, that's the caliber he played. He was a really good, James is a really good player. He hasn't played anymore, but he was a really good player. He was an unknown player, except the pros all knew him. They wouldn't play him.
I've heard he was probably the best. In his prime, he was the best money player in the country.
Well, there was other money players. You had Cornbread up in Billy Burge up in Detroit. He was a good money player. There were other good players around the country. Every area's got their favorite player. James was ours here, and he was a great player.
Were you there when James played Danny Basovich, Kid Delicious? At Mikey's.
Yeah, I was.
You were there?
Yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I didn't watch the game.
Oh.
I was there, and I had to leave. He won.
James won?
Yeah. Yeah, he won. Well, he used to give one of the greatest bar pool players in the country the last 2 on a bar table. James had a real good break, and he had a really good cue ball. Had a short stroke like Alan does, Alan Hopkins, and but he's a good player, he's a great player. Hitchcock was a great player. Ronnie was a great player. We had a lot of great players came out of this city. I don't know. I can't think of it. There was not anybody in Oklahoma or anywhere in this region that could beat James. He was a good rotation player. Wasn't the best one-pocket player, but he played it pretty good. He's in the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And but he wasn't the best one-pocket player. Ronnie was the best one-pocket player during his era at Oklahoma State. Hitchcock couldn't play it. He didn't like one pocket. I could beat Hitchcock. I would need pretty good handicap playing him 9-ball. But he just didn't play one pocket.
All right, I guess we better talk about pool cues. So we're going to go back to Denver.
Right.
All right, and you're 40 almost. You're 40.
46.
You're 46.
Mm-hmm.
And what in the world made you want to start making?
Well, I went down to Dallas for a few months and then started repairing cues and putting tips on. And I moved back to Wichita, which my mother lived there. And I moved to Denver, excuse me. I moved back to Wichita just briefly and then moved back to Denver. And I put together a shop and started a repair business. And everybody wanted me to make a cue, so I started making cues. And it was 1986.
Okay.
And
38 years ago, 38 years ago. What type of cue was your first cue you made?
well, I've got a picture of it at home. Sold it for, I know, this guy by the name of Danny Chavez bought it. His girlfriend paid for it for his birthday. It's my first cue. It was $500. Looked like a tad.
Yeah.
Kind of. Nice cue. I've got a picture of it at home. It's the first cue I ever made. And he turned down $1,000 for it. One of the tournaments up at Shooters in Olathe.
Yeah. He turned down $1,000 for it.
He turned down $1,000 for it. That was my first cue. I made a cue for you and your dad. Made one.
You made one for me, and that was in 2003. I mean, I graduated high school in 04, so
Yeah, it was.
I was still in high school.
Yeah, it was. It was a 60-inch cue.
Yeah, you remember what it looked like?
Yeah, I do.
There's a player here in town that has that cue,
Who is it?
Justin.
Justin still got it. Well, he's the one that got it from the guy that drove the UPS.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name now.
Dustin Jones.
Dustin now.
So anyway, that cue, I think it might have been a $1,200 or $1,300 cue then. You made me a great deal on it, but you couldn't buy that cue for a few thousand now.
That's true.
Everybody wanted that cue from me.
That was a good looking cue. A good playing cue. I stress playability over inlays and facade. You got to have a good finish, which I didn't have a real good finish, but the cue was made well. And I quit making them about 4 years ago.
How good at it were you when you started versus,
Making cues?
Yeah. What was your learning curve like? Were you
Oh, it was about the first 5 years.
first 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
And
Then you pick up things as you go. You learn little tricks, little ways of doing things that you didn't know before, faster ways, better ways. And all my cues were short spliced, handmade, and there were players' cues. There's a couple players that, there's a lot of players that own them, and they won't sell them
yeah.
for some reason. But they're not replaceable now. But I had to quit because of my COPD. I had to quit making them because of the dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about how many cues you think you've made, custom cues.
I should have kept records, but I didn't. Probably 150.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, you sure sold a lot of cues over the last 20 years I've known you.
Yeah. We got a lot of trade-ins, and
Yeah, you'd always trade.
well, you get 2 sales instead of 1, and nobody can figure that out. But
So if you trade, you get 2 sales instead of 1.
right.
Okay.
Per trade. You get a sale because of the trade. Some people can't afford your cue, and they can trade what they have and some money, and end up with a pretty nice cue, and then you sell the trade in. And usually it's from a pretty good player, and it resell. So you get 2 sales.
It's like the car lot.
Same thing.
Well, I've had 2 of your cues.
Yeah.
The one I bought from him back when me and Shannon opened the pool hall in Lawton. And then I got the 16 point that you made.
Mm-hmm.
I wound up with it, but you didn't get finished.
I made two of them. Made one for Sparkman.
That's the one I got.
That's the one you got?
That's one I had, but it wasn't finished, and then I let somebody and
I finished it, I think.
no, it didn't have the finish, and the shafts weren't complete. But then I heard that you were in bad health. Well, I took them to Barry Reynolds in Cash. He built cues, and I just didn't like the way he finished it. And then I just wound up trade. I wish I wouldn't have, but I just didn't like the way that he finished
I
it.
remember the cue.
Had the spiral curly maple shafts.
Really good shafts. Those are the best. We didn't have carbon fiber then, of course, and or Predator. Well, we did. Predator started coming out in the early 2000s. But as far as deflection, the ones that were curly maple were the best non-deflection shafts you could get a hold of. And they were like gold, really.
I bought my first Predator shaft off of you. I drove to your house in Edmond. Me and my first wife drove over there. You'd ordered it, and I come to your house and picked it up.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was like 1998,
Well, I think you've
99.
probably sold over 150 pool tables.
Oh, I sold more than that. Sold
I mean,
800 or 900 pool tables at AAA over a 10-year period of time. And Shannon and her crew installed every one of them. Probably 99% of them. And because she's done a lot of tables for me. She's a good installer. Stubborn, but good installer.
well, what made you want to expand beyond just cues and cue repair? Start.
I needed a place to play.
Okay.
And so most of the pool, I couldn't smoke because of the COPD. Everything was smoking in Oklahoma City. See, California outlawed smoking probably in the 80s or the 90s. Most states did, and this state didn't. So everywhere you had to go, you had to breathe smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had COPD and I couldn't play in there, so I put in my first pool room so I'd have a place to play. That was the only reason. And to supplement the income, we started selling tables. Put the cue shop in. Started making cues and repairing cues there, and we did real well. It was good business. In fact, this table here, you bought, and I ended up with it again from John Barton. This is one of the first ones that we put 5 of these in to get started. And
In your first pool room.
my first pool,
What year was that?
not 2005.
2005. Okay.
But we stripped them, restained them. These are good tables. They're all mahogany. Today, they're all particle board or MDF board. The frames, I'm not talking about the top rails, but the frames and the legs are particle board. These are mahogany, and they're a good table. This table here was probably made somewhere between 1959 and 1963. We had 5 of them, identical. All of them had 4 1/4, 4.5 inch pockets. All of them had Simonis, all of them had brand new rails. We put new rails, new rail liners, and new cushions on all of them. Played good. And we got a lot of compliments on them.
Do you think you've sold as many pool tables as anyone in the state?
I don't know. Probably our Armenians have.
Oh, our Galleria company.
Yeah. Armenians or AJ Gill, maybe. They
Yeah.
sell a lot of tables. I think Armenians probably sells the most tables in this state. They got a bigger supply here. They've got one in Kansas City. They've got
One in Tulsa.
they have one in Tulsa.
Can you tell us about your favorite cue that you've ever made? Do you have one?
It's in Boston, and I can't buy it back. I've tried.
You can't? It's
Well-
in Boston, and what's so special about it?
It just hit good. I had a different way of, I had a professional model, which I put the weight just ahead of where I had to have the guy stand while I was making it to measure where to put the weight. I put the weight right in front of your hand instead of behind your hand. And you get a better, just a better balance. It's my professional model. And I wish I could get that cue back. It was the first one I made. And a good friend of yours of mine, Walter Glass, got so mad at me when I sold that cue. He wouldn't even speak to me for a year. Boy, he got mad. And I've been trying to get it back for years. I can't get it back. Made it as rosewood and bird's eye maple with a brown leather wrap. Gorgeous cue. But it played good.
Yeah.
And he's not, in fact, he's not speaking to me right now. I don't know what's the matter. He's a funny guy.
Yeah.
He's a good guy, though.
Tell me about let's say, the most expensive pool table that someone's purchased. Or snooker or billiards or anything. I know because you've sold them all.
This one over here sells for $12,000.
Yeah. This three cushion table.
That three cushion. It's a Gabriel's out of Belgium.
Heating.
Heated.
Heated, and it's got what kind of slate?
Granite. It's three pieces of granite. They're 2 inches thick, at least 2 inches. They're really a good table. They make 6 by 12 snooker tables like that Kling over there, and they make a lesser billiard table than that one. This is the most expensive one they make, and that's what they use in all the tournaments in Europe. That's probably the best table I've ever owned. Other than that one, probably the Kling. We had that was made for Kling and Allen's in Kansas City, and I don't know how many they made. They didn't make too many of them.
Can you tell us a little bit about the game of golf played on a pool table and your experience with it? I mean, people local here know that you've hosted a golf game for years and years, but can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's a dying sport like snooker did, and it's a social game more than anything else. You get 5, 6 players. It's usually 4 to 6, and it's a social game, and everybody. You have maybe 40 or 50 or 60 players, not all at the same time, but they kind of rotate in and out. Constantly have 4 to 6 players on it all the time. And you start out at the breaking end of the table on the pocket to your right, lower right, the corner pocket to your lower right, and you go clockwise around the table. That's number 1, and then number 2 at the opposite corner, and then number 3, the side pocket. 4, the top corner pocket. 5, the pocket across from it, and 6. And first 1 to 6 wins the pot. And you get penalized every time you scratch, and it's just a social game. The guys fight and argue all the way through it, and
It's just like golf.
you have to have rules. It's just like dominoes.
Yep.
Let's talk about these rules because whenever you go to a golf game, you got to play with their rules, and apparently the rules are different in different places.
They are. They're different in every city. And what we did is we have a composite of everybody's rules. What we did is we picked out the rules. I'll tell you what rules are really for. Rules are to solve arguments. That's what they're for. If you have an argument about something, then you go to the house rules, and That'll settle the argument. You gotta play by house rules.
Well, I mean, do you have any funny arguments that aren't
Oh,
too,
God.
that aren't too bad?
You can't believe it.
Who argues the third one?
It is just unbelievable. That's all they do is argue. And you're not supposed to coach. You can't tell an opponent which pocket to shoot or which rail to hit first or where to lead the cue ball. That's really a no-no in the game. You can't coach people until after the shot. If you make a hickey, we call that a scratch. If you don't hit a rail, if you miss your ball, if you make somebody else's ball, there's several ways to scratch, like pool or like billiards, whatever. You get a hickey, and it's worth usually 10% of what you're betting.
So 5 and 50, or 50 and 5.
50 and 5 would be $50 a game and $5 a hickey.
So if there was 4 players playing,
Well, you'd win about 200 or 300 per game. But they don't normally play for 10-1 or 10 and 50 cents or something like that. That's the standard.
what's the
game.
highest you've seen or hosted?
Well, we played, I staked a guy named Danny Medina in Nashville. We were down there in a tournament down there at JOB's. And,
JOB Billiards.
yeah, and we went over to bowling that league. They had a 6x12. And there's 2 bookies. And they backed a guy that's probably the best player in Nashville at the time. He's deceased now. And we played for, they put what they call a hickey ball in the middle. And what it was a cue ball sitting on a piece of upside down chalk with a concave up, so the ball had somewhere to sit.
Huh.
If you hit it or knocked it over, then you got charged 5 hickeys. So we were playing for $500 a game and $50 a hickey.
Wow.
And our first game we lost $2,800.
In
We
one
lost
game?
one game, and I only had about 3,000. And I told the guy, the backer that was backing the guy we were playing, I said, if this continues, I'm going to have to go to an ATM. And he acknowledged it. He was a bookie. He understood. And because I didn't have about 3,000, and I had, I ran out of money the first game. Well, we ended up winning quite a bit of money at the end. Danny was a good snooker player. That was his best game. Again, everybody played snooker through the 50s and the 60s, up through the 60s. Then they started playing. When the bar tables came out, the tavern, the little 7-foot tables, and the league started, everybody got away from snooker and started playing leagues and on the smaller tables. And plus, you could put 2 bar tables where 1 snooker table was and make twice as much money in a pool room. So they were, everybody converted from snooker to 7-foot pool tables. And that's what, that was predominant.
Well, Chris, what am I missing here? I could talk about a bunch of different things, but tell me what your most exciting time of being a pool room owner has been. Like, what's the best days you can remember? I remember when the golf game was booming.
We had it every day. Every day. There would be 4, 5, 6 players. They'd come in, get in the game, play 3 or 4 games, and leave. And then 5 or 10 minutes later, here come another one. Just went on and on and on. And they played from 10 in the morning till midnight.
So I played a couple times.
Huh?
So I played a couple times.
Did you?
Is it safe
Yeah.
to say that
Yeah.
all your friends play pool? Or know about pool?
I never had a lot of friends that played pool. I tried to stay away from that element. 'Cause they borrowed too much money, number one. Keith McCready always came up to you after he finished with the games and said, "Can I have $25 for a hamburger?" And you'd give it to him because you know he'll never pay it back at the time. Now, he's probably changed his ways now. I think he's got married. He's got a fiance, etc. He's normal.
25 for a hamburger. That's a good hamburger.
Well, yeah, big hamburger. We, I don't know how to answer that question. It's a hard question. I got a lot of close friends that are Walter Glass, you, a few good friends,
Yeah.
pool players. But most of the time, I kind of stay away from that particular culture. Let's
Hooligans.
put it that way. Yeah.
Well, if the Oklahoma City pool players all count you as a friend, like they go, oh yeah, I know Kent, we're buddies.
Yeah, well, they're a good group.
I think they probably owe him money.
No, they don't. They're a good group. We had all kinds of players coming in to play for money from all parts of the country, and you had to be really careful. You've been around pool for 20 years, and you know how it is in the pool world.
Yeah.
It's got to be careful.
So when do you think pool was at its best in Oklahoma? Was it
Probably.
a decade of it?
Probably, I think probably in the 70s or the 80s, probably. Probably. Pool's been a good game in Oklahoma, always has been. Longdale, that was the action spot in Longdale, Oklahoma, down there on the lake. Ronnie Allen, O.J. Puckett, on and on and on. They were all down there gambling. And all the real rich farmers were down there betting on them and backing them.
Well, every time I walked in the billiard palace, kids rushed to the door with wads of money asking if I wanted to gamble, wanted to play.
Tulsa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, I've seen more action in that place
There was a lot of action in Tulsa.
than I've seen anywhere.
Actually, there was more pool playing in Tulsa than Oklahoma City. Yeah. Well, there was. We had there was a real good player out of down by the lake. Oh, it's just south of Muskogee, the big lake down there.
You follow?
Eufaula. They called him the Eufaula Kid. And he had a haircut like yours. Well, it was a flat top. It was the style then. Looked like a college kid. And he was one of the best one-park players ever came out of the state. And people, what they played him, they made a mistake. Because he could really play. He learned from Ronnie. Ronnie taught him how to play. We've had Ronnie Allen had such a great imagination. He just it was just a natural thing. It was just a natural. He was a great one-park player. His best game was golf. And I was at Sid Barcelone's Velvet Rail Billiards in Denver. Ronnie came in. Sid was a bookmaker at that time. This has been 20 years ago. Yeah, it's about 30 years ago. And he came in and played Sid, and he was beating Sid. And Sid says, I quit unless you give me a spot. And Ronnie says, I'll tell you what, if you give me the first hole, spot me the first hole, which that meant he didn't have to make the first hole. He could start with the second hole, and then only had to make 5 holes to win the game. That was his handicap he was offering Sid. Sid went for it. He said, yeah, I'll do that. And he says, I'll play one-handed, jacked up in the air. And I'm going to tell you how good Ronnie played. Tight table, it was a 10-foot table, 5 to 10. Tight table. He got a shot, and he ran 5 holes and out. Jacked up, one-handed.
Wow.
Great one-handed player. Ronnie was really good. He played almost as good one-handed as he played two-handed. But he just had a great imagination. And a lot of people didn't like Ronnie because he was loud and always talking. We walked into a room in Toledo, Ohio, and he was standing in the corner holding his cue, facing the corner of the room, standing there holding his cue like
Like
that.
he's in trouble.
No, yeah, like he's like a school kid in trouble. And I walked over and I said, Ronnie, what are you doing? He says, shh, that's the spot. I got to stand in the corner while they're shooting.
That's the spot. He has to stand in the corner while they shoot. Can he look?
He would actually bend over and look at the guy while he was shooting. I mean, he sharked you. And he was unbelievable. But he was a great player. I don't care what anybody says. He never beat Hitchcock
Yeah.
playing rotation or snooker or billiards. But
You told me about I think you told me a story one time about this guy out of Chicago that come down here and hustled everybody. Come down here with a briefcase full of money. Said he'd play anybody in the state, and I cannot remember. Was it Irving Crane? No.
Irving was a tournament player only. He sold Cadillacs full time.
Wade was his son, not Wade Crane.
No, that was kind of a nickname, I think. No, wasn't Wade. I'll tell you a story about Wade in a minute. A really good story.
Okay.
But I can't think of who you're talking about. He went by Wade Crane as kind of like an alias, so he wouldn't get knocked. You got to remember, we didn't have. If you think about it, we didn't have the internet
Right.
20 years ago or 30
Right.
years ago. We did have it sort of, but up to 30 years ago,
You know your cell phone.
we
you
didn't
just
know what
let somebody
anybody
up.
looked like.
Yeah.
Now, they know who, I mean, if Frederick Gorst walked into a pool room, they'd point him out.
Yeah.
But then they wouldn't pay attention to him 30 years ago. And so you could get by with stuff 30 years ago, you couldn't today.
Tell us about the Wade Crane.
Wade was in Vegas. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. I hope these guys aren't alive. He was playing blackjack and won several thousand. Got really lucky and cashed in. Left the casino with all his clothes in his room. He says, got on a bus and left. Went back, he went back to the Carolinas and opened up a pool room. He won quite a bit of money, by the way, and opened up a pool room. Now, his rack boy was Don Watson. And nobody knew who the hell Don Watson was. Don was, he was really in his prime when he was in his 40s. Well, that's when I knew him. Now, he's probably played better when he was in his 30s or a teenager or 20s. But anyway, he was the rack boy because they were friends. And road players, which we call them, that they roamed from town to town playing pool, would come in. They knew Wade gambled, and they would ask Don, who was working the day shift, what time Wade came in, and Don would tell him about 6 or 7, and he would work on through the 2 o'clock in the morning. And they said, he said, well, would you guys like to play? I'll play you a few games till Wade gets there. And the word got around. Of course, they didn't beat Don because Don played better than Wade. The word got around the country, don't mess with that rack boy down at Wade's pool room. It's got all around the country. Do not play that rack boy.
Tell me exactly what a rack boy would do.
Well,
rack the balls, but like
He
this
racked
one-
the balls and charged him 10 cents or 20 cents a game.
That's it.
Just make sure you're paying for your table time.
Right.
They had
You didn't play by the hour.
They had a men's club there in Chick Shack.
Same
And
thing.
had a rack boy, or the guy that owned the place would, after you got done with the game, he'd come over and collect your money and rack them up for you.
So that was the cost for the game as well?
Well, it'll say the game was, in Wichita, it was 10 cents a game for 9-ball. And whoever made the 9-ball won the game, obviously. And you'd holler rack, and the rack boy would come down and re-rack it for you and charge you for the last game you played. It was called a rack boy.
So you didn't rent the table by the hour, you paid it by the
Well,
game?
no, not they pay it by the game, right.
No coin mechanisms. There was a rack boy.
Yeah, they bar tables were not
Yeah.
really very dominant at that time. They didn't really become dominant until about 1970.
Mizrack said, or
How
Buddy
did
Hall, who said bar table was a ruined pool.
Well, they changed the game. Well, there was no more snooker after bar tables became popular.
When they changed it to where 8 on the break was a win, when they come up with the bar table.
No, that didn't do it. One foul ball in hand helped 8-ball. And because people would scratch on purpose, and if the 8-ball was behind the head string, you had to kick at it.
Yeah.
Okay. When one foul ball in hands became prominent in the 1990s, it's called Texas Express. Remember that term? Okay, that was one foul ball in hand. You put the ball anywhere you wanted to. So if they scratched on purpose and it didn't do them any good, they lost the game anyway. Before then, they could scratch on purpose, and if the 8-ball was behind the line, you had to kick at it, could win the game. But after that, the one foul ball in hand rule, it helped 8-ball tremendously. It didn't help 9-ball, but it helped 8-ball. Everybody used to play. Well, when I first started playing pool, you had to hit the ball. And if you missed it, you were required to shoot again. And if you missed it again, you just kept shooting until you hit it. And then they started playing 2-shot shootout. And then if you missed the ball twice in a row, you got ball in hand. And that was a good game because you spotted the ball, shot behind the head string, and you had to make a spot shot. You spot all balls. Then Texas Express took over in the 90s, and you didn't spot all balls after that. Sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't, just depended upon the pool room. And spot shots at that time were considered the prime shot you had to learn how to make.
Didn't one of the Broadways start Texas Express, or was it
No,
Randy Dotlicker?
no.
He just ran.
There's somebody from, I can't remember where he was from. He was from Dallas.
Somebody from Texas?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah,
Randy just ran ran part of the Texas Express tour.
he did. No, this guy's last name, I think it starts with an M, I can't remember it. John was his first name. In fact, he opened up a pool room in Denver, but it wasn't successful. John, I can't think of his name. It would be, you could Google it and find out. He started Texas Express, and from there on, most all tournaments turned to one foul ball in hand. I guess prior to that, tournaments like Johnson City's tournaments were one foul ball in hand. But most places was 2-shot shootout. Any 2 fouls in a row, consecutive, the opposing player got the ball in hand.
I think we're gonna wrap this up, and then I want to allow our viewers to maybe comment on the channel and then ask their own questions. We might do a follow-up interview with you
Fine,
with some more.
right now?
No, not right now.
Okay.
After we post this up, and get some questions, from other people.
Well, I got a lot of stories to tell. I could go on and on and on, because I played pool from the 81 to 2000, maybe 2019, about almost 40 years, a little over 40 years. That's all I did was play pool. And boy, I met some characters. Got a lot of stories. But anyway, that's a different time. Yeah, it's a different time.
Well, Kent, thank you for having us. Appreciate your stories. I mean, I appreciate your
Pleasure.
friendship for
It's
the
always a
last,
pleasure to sit with you.
you know, over 20 years.
Well, you've always been a good friend. And your dad called me the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when are you going to meet Sean?
Huh?
He says, when are you going to meet Sean?
Today.
This is probably
Oh,
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was that. We go to the pool room 4 days a week now. He's working out and playing pool.
Good. He's not playing golf anymore.
I think he's just too committed to pool.
He just loves pool. Loves pool and pool cues.
He's buying one today, probably.
Oh, he's every day. He really has.
All right, guys. Like I said, we're going to get some questions from you to Mr. Kent Taylor. We'd love you to give us a like, a subscribe, and a share. Thank you.